Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Mailbox for the 25th of May 2011. My name is Totalbiscuit, answering all your questions from around the community. As I said when I cancelled Azeroth Daily, the Mailbox will be a daily show in and of itself, and will be expanded out to cover pretty much all games. So any questions you want to ask, anything you want discussed on the show, this is the community interaction show that's going to be happening now 5 days a week. And I'll just be putting random game footage that I've been playing over the day in the background, so you can expect to see all kinds of nonsense. WoW-themed questions are welcome, that's not a problem, and of course we'll be talking about some general gaming stuff. I expect maybe the first few shows to be pretty WoW-heavy, because people are still transitioning over to asking other questions, but you can email in the same place as you always could, mailbox@cynicalbrit.com. We're looking to make this segment about 15 minutes in length, give or take, on a daily basis. So any questions you want answering, then just send them my way. They do have to be gaming related in some respect. I'm not going to give you advice about your freaking girlfriend. First question comes in from Anonymous. It says, Dear TB, I was on the forums looking for posts regarding the huge community rage over the upcoming nerfs. What I've found might just be the dumbest thing I've ever seen from a blue post, let alone Bashiok. And this is what he said. I think the biggest issue now is that Cataclysm didn't launch with an intro raid tier. We're now following through with the stair-step method of having one hard raid and one intro raid. But it took time to see the plan through, which is obviously a bit jarring. So now we have a new tier. Valor points convert to Justice points, the old tier gets stepped down, and the new hotness is going to be that difficult climb. The writer goes on to say now, what exactly were Heroics and Justice Point gear? So what, there was no tier set bonus? We didn't all have the same armor? It sure felt like we did. There were the stepping stones to Heroics, but there was also the stepping stones to regulars. The stepping stones to the regular instances too. If Cataclysm's launch was bad because of anything, it was bad because they didn't bring us the content fast enough. 4.0.1 should have been Firelands. Well, no, 4.1 should have been Firelands, but there you go, whatever the case. But the Heroics are supposed to get us ready for raids, and then after that, the raid should get us ready for the raids, and not the easy raids that everyone's going to one-shot in one night, and then cry that they can't get the first boss down in Firelands with. That's the problem with it, really, isn't it? They don't understand what stepping stone actually means. If they step the content down, then what do you think these people who are incapable of doing that content are going to do in Firelands? They're going to flounder badly. It's the same thing that happened at the start of Wrath. We had this intro tier in Wrath. It was called Naxxramas, and it was awful. It was incredibly bad. It was really easy. And what happened? People went into Ulduar and they wiped for days on XT002. Why did that happen? Because XT002 is by far and away much, much harder than anything they had faced previously, aside from maybe Sartharian 3 Drakes, which became a DPS race in a very short period of time. And of course, those people didn't do Sartharian 3 Drakes, so it's irrelevant. And none of that content prepared them for what was going on in Ulduar. And you want to know what happened? Ulduar got nerfed hard. XT002 is one of the most nerfed bosses in the history of World of Warcraft. It's as simple as that. And that attitude is the problem. Here's the thing. If you want people to learn, then you've got to say, look, this is the bar, we expect you to, through practice, get over it. Not, here's the bar, well, you can't get over it, so we're going to keep lowering it. Because you don't learn anything that way. If you make the bosses face rollable, then it's even more jarring when you get to the next one. That's not stepping stones. You know, that isn't a step. That's a climbing wall, without any handholds. Now, we had steps before. Admittedly, they were fairly steep steps. You had to work at it, you had to exercise to be able to run up and down them. But in this case, what we've got is we've got this nice flat little floor right here, and then people are going to have to jump over this giant freaking climbing wall. These players are not going to be able to do Firelands. The only thing that they'll be able to do is complain about Firelands, and then, of course, Firelands will end up getting nerfed, I can pretty much guarantee it. They already nerfed the raid content several times already. This is going to be the biggest sweeping nerf we've seen. They're going to do the same thing with the Firelands. They're going to keep doing it until either enough people quit to make them change their mind, or until the end of the expansion. It's just what's going to happen. We've seen it before. There's plenty of evidence with Wrath, and it's an incredibly stupid idea, and I absolutely agree. That was an intro tier, along with the Heroics. The problem is they made it less of an intro tier by nerfing the whole bloody lot of it. And as a direct result of that, Bashiok is trying to make excuses for their mistake, and I do not agree with it. This one comes in from Galcia. It says, in Guild Wars, they have an observer mode that you can initiate from any town or stronghold. You can use this feature to watch PvP matches, either one person with heroes versus another, or whole teams fighting each other. Now, not only is this a great way to learn some PvP tricks, but it also gives you something entertaining to watch. My question is, what is your opinion of WoW having a similar feature? It would be a lot of fun to watch people PvP, but it would also be great because it could be used to watch people run dungeons and raids as well. This could be used to watch what a friend is doing, or if you're in a guild and get left out of a raid, you could watch your guild's progress. It would take a lot of technical power and probably be difficult to implement, but I think overall it would be entertaining and helpful. Well, I think there's a reason why Guild Wars has very successful PvP and has had for a long time, and World of Warcraft does not, and it's simply because of that spectator aspect. I mean, not only is it a good balanced PvP game that's actually... It's easy to learn, but it's hard to master, because you can only take 8 abilities in Guild Wars, unless they've changed that since I last played it. You've got a selection of abilities that you can fairly easily master. Remember that old quote that I came up with? I know it's not accurate, but it's amusing enough to prove the point. And it says that WoW is the only game that has more abilities than you can feasibly bind to usable keys, and yet still requires no skill to actually play. Now, of course, it does require skill to play. A lot of games, in fact, almost all games require some form of skill. But the point is kind of valid, because PvP just has tons and tons and tons of buttons to deal with, and it's more about, can you memorize all of these button combinations? And I know that puts a lot of people off, and the amount of abilities that are used in PvP and in arenas specifically actually make it less of an e-sport. I don't know if a lot of people are interested in being an e-sport, but it used to be. They used to have it at MLG and all sorts of things like that until they realized it's a terrible, terrible thing to spectate. And the only reason people were watching it is because they were inherently familiar with WoW. Didn't mean they understood what was going on. I mean, I tried casting it once. You can see it. It's on my channel. I've put a link on the annotation right there. Click on that. You can watch me casting Arena. I did it once. I won the Arena Shoutcasting contest by doing this, and I was talking out of my ass. I had no idea what was going on, and that is the first and last time I've ever tried to do anything with it. But whatever the case, the lack of spectator mode means that as a PvP game, it's pretty much dead in the water. The only way to experience spectator PvP is in officially sanctioned events, which now barely ever happen, and through people's streams and VODs, and then you only get to see one part of the battle. I don't know why they never implemented that, but it doesn't seem to be high up their priority list, and it's certainly something they could do with doing. But I think PvP has much greater problems than that, in the fact that it's just really dull to watch in general. This one comes in from Artemis. It says, hello TB, many of us are awaiting the upcoming release of Diablo 3, and approximately a year ago, I decided that when it finally comes out, I would celebrate my love of the Diablo series by hosting and commentating on PvP duels and arena fights. My enthusiasm for this idea has only grown with my enthusiasm for Diablo 3 itself, which I have been eagerly awaiting since word of its development reached me here in isolated Australia. Much more recently, about 2 months ago, I was introduced to your videos, starting with Azeroth Daily, and despite not being a Warcraft fan, let alone a WoW player, I became hooked and started watching your videos on a daily basis. Whilst I play none of those games you showcase regularly, I do find your shows entertaining, and more often than not, filled with a level of insight that I rarely manage to find on the internet. My question is this: where did you start from before becoming a well-known figure in gaming, which you have become, and how did you make it to where you are? Are there any tips you would offer a newbie in your field? And of course, what do you think of my plan? Would duels and arena fights be entertaining? Well, I suppose I can answer the whole duels and arena fights thing. If there is an audience for it, then go for it. And there's this old phrase, if you build it, they will come. There's always an audience for something. It's whether or not it's big enough to be sustainable as a career path or just as a hobby. You know, you need a certain amount of views, as obviously as well as YouTube partnership, to actually make it into a career. But I don't know if you're asking whether or not you want to do that. I mean, maybe you just want to do it as a hobby, which to me seems far more practical for most people. I think a lot of people do aspire to the idea of, oh, I can make money by doing gaming commentary, but while it's a cool idea, there are actually very, very few people that have enough views to sustain a living from it. And it's not something you should necessarily aspire to. I kind of fell into it, and it's an extension of what I've been doing for the last 10 years, which is mostly online DJing, as well as the talk radio. The World of Warcraft stuff, Blue Please, has been around for 6 years, and I also did a lot of gaming podcasts and commentary and things like that. So that and the amount of Let's Play stuff. I did do a Let's Play back in the day. Actually, it was Shining Force 3. I didn't finish it, and it took a little bit too long, and I'm very much considering bringing it back. It was over on the Something Awful Let's Play forums, which are an excellent resource for Let's Play stuff in general. Some of the best, if not the best, Let's Play content is over there. Although, what I would say is that, yes, you do have to pay to be on that forum, and no, don't act like a jackass, because you will get torn apart. They are some of the strictest forums. It is a trial by fire to post on there, and that's good. It keeps the quality control up for the most part, especially in terms of the Let's Play stuff. So I kind of went from there, and I used that experience to build interesting Cataclysm beta content, which I use as my platform to push the other stuff, and I expanded out from there. I've said this before, but it's very accurate. It's all about consistency. If you want people to watch your videos, you have to be consistent. And that's not just in the case of release, although that's very important. I mean, I put out videos every day. If people come to my channel, 99% of the time, there will be something new on there that they haven't seen before if they're looking at it on a daily basis. That's how you keep people subscribed to your channel, because it's actually more convenient for them to just hit that sub button and get your videos through on the YouTube interface or via email or whatever, than it is to keep checking the channel if you keep putting up new content. And I go for a lot of variety, although that can actually hurt a lot of channels, so you do have to be very careful with what you do. I mean, for instance, a good example would be whenever Husky tries to put up something like Let's Play or whatever, and it's not StarCraft. Because he did so much StarCraft, people just want StarCraft. And I love Husky to death, you know, he's one of my best friends. And it's unfortunate to see that a lot of these guys turn around and don't actually like it when he does something that isn't StarCraft. That kind of sucks. But this channel has had a lot of variety on it for a while, and way before the Cataclysm beta ended, I started introducing new things, like obviously the StarCraft, and we had the WTF Is, which has become now my most popular series. And that was in preparation for Cataclysm beta ending, and that's the reason why the channel actually didn't fall over. It thrived after the Cataclysm beta ended, because I've always got a plan to transition out of one game into another if I either just lose all enthusiasm for the game or something goes horribly wrong with it. It's always good to have a plan in that regard. But yeah, consistency. And remember one very important, it's a harsh lesson, but it's very important. I wish it wasn't this way, but it's very important, and this is how it works. YouTube is personality-driven, not quality-driven. I wish that that was different, but that's actually how the world works as well. It's about marketing a personality, and it's about creating this consistent persona that people are attracted to and want to watch. And in my case, it's the whole Cynical Brit brand, and people, as you said, will watch stuff that I make for games they don't even play. You watched Azeroth Daily, and yet you never played WoW. How do you explain that? Well, the reason is that it's a consistent format with a set personality, and people get attracted to the personality of the caster as opposed to the actual quality of the content. It sucks. I hate that it's this way, but it is. That's how it works. So consider that, and don't force a personality. That's the worst thing. Don't contrive yourself a personality. You've got to find something about your personality that people might find good to listen to, and then maybe expand on that. You know, maybe make it a little bit larger than life, but don't go crazy. I think people detect forced enthusiasm and forced mannerisms way easier than you might think. Okay, we'll do one last email for today, and this one, once again, is WoW-themed, which is to be expected. As I say, I would expect the next few days to be fairly WoW-heavy, considering the transition. This one comes in from an anonymous viewer that says, while I don't always agree with your opinion, more often than not, you've hit quite the right point. I do understand your frustration regarding the recent announcement of massive nerfs coming in patch 4.2, but at the same time, one thing still struck me. The only thing they're planning on nerfing right now are the normal modes of the old content by then. It also means that players would progress fast through that tier, which would in turn allow them to get into the heroic mode faster, making them less burnt out by the time that they arrive there and making progress. Also, a nerf like this has been performed every time a new tier has released, be it a flat-out percentage of health and damage reduced, or a gradual percentage raising in dealt damage, health, and healing performed by players. So while I do agree that a flat-out nerf is not necessarily needed, as content does nerf itself over time as people gear up, I don't see quite the huge waves this particular nerf is causing. Yes, the old content is being made easier, but it is just the normal mode, and it's happened all the time before. So what I would like to ask specifically is, why is this particular nerf enough to quit over more than the previous nerfs of dungeons and raids? Okay, well, there's a few reasons why the comparison that you made is not quite valid. For instance, you said, oh, well, it'll make it much easier for people to get into heroic modes and they won't get burned out on the content as quickly. Do you seriously believe that the kind of people who were unable to complete the normal modes pre-nerf, and I do mean nerf, by the way, because they've already been nerfed once, so this is the second wave of nerfing. Do you really think those people can handle heroics? No, they can't. Heroics are much, much more difficult. All Blizzard has succeeded in doing is widening the gap to the point where these guys are never going to manage it. I mean, how are they going to learn the necessary skills to take on heroic mode content? Because unless they vastly overgear it, and that's assuming that the mechanics even support overgearing to begin with, unless they do that, they're not going to stand a chance. They're learning on content which is actually way worse than the stuff that the other guys learned on, and other people are still having problems. You've seen the percentages, for God's sake. Only 7% of raid guilds have managed to take down Heroic Valiona and Thoralion. That's insanely low. This stuff is hard, and I've never ever claimed otherwise, and no one is claiming that heroics are easy under any circumstances. So, no, that doesn't work. That's a silly attitude. The logic doesn't actually hold any water whatsoever. Now, in terms of the actual nerfing, I've never liked the fact that the gradual percentage has risen over time anyway for damage, health, and healing done. And that's why I also object to the whole badge system and the way that it works. Sure, if people are able to do content beyond that and overgear it by doing content beyond that, then fine, we used to have that system. We picked up little pieces of gear from the first couple of bosses of Nax, for instance, to assist us in downing Cthulhu and then Oro and Vescidius. And that was fine, there was nothing wrong with that whatsoever. Unfortunately, at this point, it's not, well, you can go into Firelands and maybe pick off the low-hanging fruit to give you some gear to help you out. It's more, well, here's some gear for doing vastly inferior content. I just want gear to be matched up to how good the content actually is and how difficult the content actually is. I want proper proportions, proportional reward, risk-reward. It's such an integral part of game design. So that's my rationale behind that. It makes players worse. You will not have people learning. The player-based quality will go down and down and down the more of this is done. It's already hit rock bottom from Wrath. You see the evidence every day, every time you queue up for a Dungeon Finder pug. The quality of the player base has got lower. It's as simple as that. That needs to be dealt with, and this is not the way to deal with it. This attitude is bogus, and I feel that Blizzard has completely forsaken their roots and the people that actually made them popular to begin with. So, there you go. Yeah, I could go on all day about the reasoning. I've already given you 10 minutes on the last Azeroth Daily, so we'll see. I probably won't answer any more questions about it. I think I've covered it to a reasonable degree. And, of course, you can hear more about it in the Shock Jock style on Friday's Blue Please. My name is Totalbiscuit, and that has been the Mailbox for today. Email mailbox@cynicalbrit.com for more questions and topics for tomorrow's show. I'll see you next time.